I was sitting in my corner office on the 42nd floor, reviewing quarterly projections for our biggest client, when my cell phone lit up with an unknown number. Tuesday afternoon, 3 o'clock. Exactly 48 hours since I'd watched my husband Robert collapse in what the paramedics later confirmed was a massive cerebral aneurysm. 48 hours since I'd held his hand in the ambulance, whispering that everything would be okay, even as his eyes stared past me at nothing. 48 hours since a doctor I'd never met told me my husband of 32 years was gone. I almost didn't answer. The last 2 days had been a blur of phone calls from family, friends, colleagues offering condolences that all sounded identical. But something made me pick up. "Mrs. Ashford?" The voice was male, careful, with that particular tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news but aren't sure how. "Yes, this is Vivian Ashford. This is Martin Cooper from Riverside Memorial. I'm the funeral director handling your husband's arrangements. Mrs. Ashford, I'm calling because we have a rather delicate situation that requires your immediate attention." I set down my pen. Delicate situation. What could possibly be delicate about a straightforward funeral arrangement? Robert and I had discussed this years ago, like responsible adults. Traditional service, burial at Greenwood Cemetery, where his parents were interred, simple mahogany casket. I'd already approved everything over the phone yesterday. "What kind of situation, Mr. Cooper?" He cleared his throat. "A woman came to the funeral home about an hour ago claiming to be your husband's widow. She's requesting to make arrangements for his body." I actually laughed. It was absurd enough to be funny. "I'm sorry, what? There must be some kind of mistake. I'm Robert's wife. We've been married for 32 years. Yes, ma'am, we have all your documentation on file. But this woman, she seems quite certain. She's very upset, actually. She brought identification and—" He paused. "Mrs. Ashford, she brought photographs, wedding photographs, of her and your husband." The air left my lungs. I stood up so fast, my leather chair rolled backward and hit the credenza. "That's impossible. There's been some kind of mix-up. Maybe she's mentally ill or confused or—" "Mrs. Ashford, I understand this is shocking, but I need to tell you something else. This woman, she looks remarkably similar to you. Same height, similar build, similar features. When she walked in, my assistant actually thought you'd arrived early." I gripped the edge of my desk. Through my office window, I could see Manhattan stretching out in every direction. All those buildings full of people living normal lives where husbands didn't apparently have secret wives. "What's her name?" "She says her name is Elena Moretti. She's asking to see Mr. Ashford's body. She's quite insistent that she has the right to make funeral arrangements according to his wishes. Mrs. Ashford, I think you should come down here. Now." I looked at the framed photograph on my desk. Robert and me in Santorini 2 years ago, celebrating our 30th anniversary. We'd spent a week at a boutique hotel overlooking the caldera. He'd held my hand at dinner every night, told me I was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. We'd made love on the balcony under the stars like newlyweds. The man in that photograph was a stranger. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking as I gathered my purse and briefcase. Patricia, my assistant, looked up from her desk as I rushed past. "Mrs. Ashford, are you all right? You look pale." "I need to go to the funeral home. Something's come up." And she stood, concern flooding her face. "Do you want me to come with you? You shouldn't be driving if you're upset." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just some paperwork issues to sort out." The drive from my office in Midtown to Riverside Memorial in Greenwich should have taken 35 minutes. I made it in 22. I don't remember most of it. My mind kept circling back to impossible explanations. Mistaken identity, a con artist trying to access Robert's estate, a disturbed woman with delusions, anything except the truth that was crystallizing in my gut like ice. Riverside Memorial was housed in a dignified Victorian mansion painted cream with forest green shutters. Robert and I had chosen it specifically because it felt elegant and understated, like everything else in our carefully curated life. I'd been here just yesterday, making arrangements with Mr. Cooper in his wood-paneled office, selecting flowers and discussing the service timeline. I parked in the small lot and sat in my Mercedes for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel. Through the funeral home's front windows, I could see movement inside. "Get out of the car, Vivian. Face whatever this is." The moment I walked through the front door, I saw her. She was standing near the guest book table in the foyer, speaking quietly with Mr. Cooper. She was my height exactly, 5'7". Her hair was steel gray, worn loose to her shoulders, where mine was colored a carefully maintained honey blonde and cut in a precise bob. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry except small pearl earrings. When she turned at the sound of the door, I understood what Mr. Cooper meant. It was like looking at an alternate version of myself. Not identical, but the bone structure was uncannily similar. The same angular jawline, the same high cheekbones, the same long neck. Even our builds were nearly identical, slender but not thin. Her eyes met mine. They were dark brown, where mine were blue-gray, but the shape was similar. And in those eyes, I saw the same thing I felt: complete devastation. "Mrs. Ashford," Mr. Cooper said quickly, moving between us like a referee. "Thank you for coming so promptly. Perhaps we could all sit down in my office and discuss this calmly." "Are you Vivian?" the woman asked. Her voice was lower than mine, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Italian, maybe." "Yes. And you're Elena Moretti?" She nodded. Her eyes were red from crying, mascara smudged beneath them. "I know this must be impossible for you to understand. I'm still trying to understand it myself." "Then explain it to me," I said. My voice came out harder than I intended. "Explain to me why you're claiming to be married to my husband." "Because I am married to him," she said simply. "For 16 years. The number hit me like a physical blow. 16 years. While I was building my consulting firm from nothing, while our children were graduating college, starting careers, getting married, while Robert and I were celebrating anniversaries and taking couples vacations and discussing retirement plans. "That's legally impossible," I said. "We never divorced. We're still married. You can't marry someone who's already married." "Please," Mr. Cooper interjected, gesturing toward his office. "Let's sit down." Elena reached into the black leather purse hanging from her shoulder and pulled out a manila folder. I brought documentation. I brought proof. We moved into Mr. Cooper's office, a space I'd sat in comfortably just yesterday. Now it felt suffocating. Elena and I took the 2 chairs facing his desk. We sat about 3 feet apart. I could smell her perfume, something floral and subtle. L'Artisan Parfumeur, the same brand I wore. Different scent, but same brand. She opened the folder with trembling hands and began laying photographs on the desk. The first one showed Robert standing next to Elena in front of a small stone chapel. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that fell to her knees, holding a bouquet of white roses. He wore a navy blue suit, the same navy blue suit he'd worn to our daughter Lily's wedding 3 years later. They were both smiling, his arm around her waist. "This was taken in Tuscany," Elena said quietly. "In a village called Montepulciano, September 15th, 2009. I picked up the photograph with numb fingers, studied Robert's face. He looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy, the same way he'd looked in our wedding photos 32 years ago. "We were at an architecture conference in Rome," Elena continued. "He said he was divorced, recently divorced. He said his marriage had ended years before, but the paperwork had just been finalized. He seemed sad about it, but ready to move forward. We spent the week together, and it was—" She paused, wiping her eyes. "It was like finding my soulmate. I was 51 then, had been widowed for 15 years. I'd given up on finding love again." She laid out more photographs. Robert and Elena at Christmas, a small tree visible behind them. Robert and Elena on a beach somewhere tropical. Robert and Elena at what looked like her birthday party. Him feeding her cake. In every single photo, he looked like himself. Not a different person playing a role, just Robert. He told me he traveled frequently for work, Elena said. He was with me on weekends, sometimes full weeks. He had an apartment in Providence where I live, a small place, but nice. He said he kept it for work trips because he had several projects in Rhode Island. Providence, I repeated. The word felt foreign in my mouth. He told me he was attending conferences in Providence, architecture conferences, sustainable design seminars. He was with me, Elena said softly. I'm so sorry. I know this is destroying you. It's destroying me, too. I looked at Mr. Cooper, who was watching both of us with profound discomfort. Is this legal? Can someone actually commit bigamy and get away with it? In the United States, your original marriage would take precedence, he said carefully. However, if Ms. Moretti's Italian marriage was conducted in good faith, believing Mr. Ashford was legally free to marry, it may be valid under Italian law while being void here. This is a very complex situation that will require legal counsel. He died in my apartment, Elena said, and her voice broke. Monday morning. We were supposed to spend the week together. He told you he was going to Boston for a project consultation, didn't he? I stared at her. Yes. He was with me. We had breakfast. He was reading the newspaper, laughing at something. Then his face changed. He grabbed his head and stood up and then collapsed. I called 911, but by the time the ambulance got there, she couldn't finish. Wait, I said. The pieces were rearranging themselves into an even more horrific picture. The hospital called me. They said Robert was brought in from his hotel in Boston. They asked me to come immediately. Elena shook her head. The hospital was in Providence. Robert had identification listing his hotel address in Boston. He always kept that in his wallet in case of emergency. He said it was important that no one knew about Providence, about me. He said it would complicate his work relationships. I thought he meant business partnerships. I never imagined... She looked at me fully then. I never imagined you. But you said you found out the truth years ago, I said, my voice rising. You said you discovered he was married, so you knew. You knew about me and you stayed with him anyway. I found out 5 years ago, Elena admitted. I saw photos on his phone. You, your children. I confronted him and he broke down. Said he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd lied to me, but he truly loved me. He said his marriage to you was dead in all but name, that you were more like business partners than spouses. He said he couldn't leave because it would destroy his relationship with his children, devastate you financially, ruin his professional reputation. She leaned forward, her face earnest. I know how this sounds. I know I sound like the other woman making excuses. But Vivian, he was going to tell you. He'd been working up to it. He said this year, after your son's promotion settled and your daughter finished her design certification, he was going to have the conversation. He said he couldn't live the lie anymore. I stood up so fast, the chair fell backward. Don't you dare try to make him sound noble. He was a coward and a liar. He lied to both of us for 16 years. I know, Elena said, crying openly now. I know he was. But I also know he loved me, just like he loved you. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's true. Why are you here? I demanded. Why did you come to claim his body? To hurt me more? To stake some kind of claim? She pulled another document from her folder. Because he wanted to be cremated. He wanted his ashes scattered in Tuscany, where we married. He made me promise years ago that if anything happened to him, I would make sure of it. I'm here because I made a promise to the man I loved. I grabbed the document. It was a handwritten letter, signed by Robert, dated 3 years ago. In it, he detailed his wishes. Cremation, no traditional funeral, ashes to be scattered at a specific vineyard in Montepulciano. I recognized his handwriting immediately. the same careful architect script that had signed birthday cards and anniversary notes for 3 decades. He told me he wanted burial at Greenwood Cemetery, I said. Next to his parents, we discussed it specifically. Because that's what you wanted, Elena said gently. That's what fit the life he had with you. But with me, he could be who he really was. He could want what he really wanted. The rage that flooded through me then was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Get out. Get away from my husband's body. You have no legal right to him. I'm his actual wife. Our marriage is recognized by this country and this state. Whatever ceremony you had in Italy means nothing here. Please, Elena begged, standing to face me. Please, I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to honor him. Honor him? I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. He deserves no honor. He deserves nothing but contempt. And you have no right to mourn him as a widow because you're not a widow. You're his mistress. That's all you ever were. Her face crumpled. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? I gave him 32 years of my life. I supported his career before I even started my own. I raised his children. I hosted the dinners and cocktail parties that brought him the clients that made him successful. I was faithful and loyal and true while he was living a completely separate life with you. So don't talk to me about what's fair. Mr. Cooper stood. Ladies, please. I understand emotions are extremely high right now, but we need to handle this procedurally. Mrs. Ashford, as the legal spouse, you do have primary right to determine funeral arrangements. However, Ms. Moretti's claims will need to be investigated. In the meantime, I'm afraid we'll need to delay any services until this is resolved. How long? I asked. It could be several weeks. I'm sorry, but with competing claims and potential legal issues, we have to be very careful. I looked at Elena one more time. She was crying silently, clutching that folder of photographs and documents like they were precious artifacts. Maybe to her they were. Maybe they were all she had left of the man who'd promised her everything while promising me the same. I need to go, I said. I can't be here anymore. I walked out of that office, out of that funeral home, back to my car where I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel and tried to remember how to breathe. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter Lily. Mom, just checking in. Do you need anything? Want me to come up from D.C.? I stared at that text and thought about what I would tell her. How do you tell your daughter that her father lived a complete double life? That the man who walked her down the aisle 3 years ago was a stranger? That everything she thought she knew about her family was a carefully constructed fiction? My phone rang. Patricia, my assistant, who was also my closest friend for 20 years. Vivian, are you okay? You never came back to the office. Patricia, I said, and my voice finally broke. I need you to meet me at my house, right now. I need someone who can help me understand what's happening because I think I'm losing my mind. I'm on my way, she said immediately. 15 minutes. Don't move, I'm coming. I drove home to the house in Greenwich that Robert and I had bought 18 years ago. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, professionally landscaped yard, worth $2.4 million according to the latest assessment. The house where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and graduation parties. The house that was supposed to be our forever home, where we'd planned to retire and host grandchildren someday. I walked in through the garage and stood in the kitchen with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances and pendant lighting over the island. Everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Coffee mug in the sink. Robert's reading glasses on the counter where he'd left them Monday morning before he'd said he was going to Boston. Before he'd kissed me goodbye and said he'd see me Friday. Before he'd driven to Providence instead to spend the week with Elena Moretti in their secret apartment. I opened the drawer where we kept important documents, pulled out our marriage certificate, June 14th, 1993, City Hall in Manhattan. Simple ceremony with just immediate family. Robert in a gray suit, me in a cream dress I'd bought at Bergdorf Goodman. We were so young. He was 26, I was 25. We thought we knew everything about love and commitment and building a life together. That certificate was real, legal, valid. But so, apparently, was another one issued in a Tuscan village 16 years ago. Patricia's car pulled into the driveway. I met her at the door, and the moment I saw her face, concerned and caring, I finally broke down. Told her everything. The phone call, the funeral home, Elena, the photographs, the 16 years, the death in Providence that was reported as Boston. She held me while I cried on my own couch in the home I'd shared with a man I'd never actually known. "We're going to figure this out," Patricia said firmly. "We're going to get through this. But first, we need to find out the full truth. Whatever Robert was hiding, whatever else there might be, you deserve to know everything." She was right, but I wasn't sure I could survive learning anything more. I met Robert Ashford in October of 1992 at a Columbia University alumni networking event in Manhattan. I was 24, working as a junior analyst at a small investment firm, barely making enough to cover rent on my studio apartment in the East Village. He was 25, in his final year of the graduate architecture program, tall and confident with dark hair that always looked slightly messy in a way that seemed intentional. He approached me at the wine table and made a joke about how the cheap Chardonnay tasted like paint thinner. I laughed and said at least it was free paint thinner. We talked for 3 hours straight, long after the event ended and the venue staff started giving us pointed looks. He walked me to the subway station and asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation, which wasn't like me at all. I'd always been careful with men, cautious about getting hurt. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village. He ordered for both of us in passable Italian, which I found charming rather than presumptuous. He told me about his thesis project, designing sustainable community housing for low-income families. His eyes lit up when he talked about architecture as social responsibility. I told him about my work analyzing market trends, which sounded boring in comparison, but he listened like it was fascinating. We were engaged 4 months later. My parents thought we were rushing. His mother was thrilled, said she'd been praying for Robert to find a good woman who would keep him grounded. We were married that June in a small ceremony at City Hall, just parents and siblings. We couldn't afford anything elaborate, and neither of us wanted a big wedding anyway. The first decade of our marriage was about building Robert's career. He joined a prestigious architecture firm in Manhattan, worked brutal hours, brought home projects to finish on weekends. I put my own career advancement on hold when Marcus was born in 1995. Stayed home for 3 years, then had Lily in 98. By the time both kids were in elementary school, I was 33 years old and hadn't worked full-time in nearly 8 years. I didn't resent it. That's what I told myself then, and I genuinely believed it. Robert was going to be successful. I could see it. His designs were innovative, his client relationships were strong, and his reputation was growing. My role was to support that, to make sure he had a stable home life that allowed him to focus on work. I organized dinner parties for potential clients, joined the right charity boards, made connections that turned into contracts for him. By the time I went back to work at 36, Robert was a junior partner at his firm. We'd moved from our small apartment in Brooklyn to a 3-bedroom house in Westchester. The kids were in good schools. Life was comfortable, stable, exactly what we'd planned. I started my consulting firm at 40. It was supposed to be a small operation, just me and maybe one assistant, helping small businesses with financial planning and investment strategies. But I discovered I was good at it, really good. Within 3 years, I had 12 employees and clients across 3 states. By the time I was 50, my firm was managing over $12 million in assets. Robert said he was proud of me constantly, told his colleagues about my success, never seemed threatened by my income eventually surpassing his. We became the power couple among our social circle, both professionally successful, both respected in our fields. But somewhere in those years between 40 and 50, our marriage changed. The passion that had defined our early relationship faded into comfortable companionship. We still had sex, but infrequently, almost scheduled around when we were both not too tired. We shared a bed, but often fell asleep reading on our respective tablets, barely touching. Our conversations revolved around the kids, work projects, household maintenance, vacation planning. I told myself this was normal. This was what happened in long marriages. The fire banks down to coals, but coals still provide warmth. We were partners, teammates, best friends. That was enough. That was more than enough. I never suspected infidelity. Not once. Robert traveled frequently for work, attending conferences, meeting with clients, supervising construction projects in other cities, Providence, Boston, Hartford, sometimes as far as Chicago or Seattle. He'd call every night when he was away, ask about my day, tell me about his meetings. He always came home when he said he would. There were no suspicious charges on our joint credit card, no unexplained absences, no strange perfume smells or lipstick stains like in the movies. Looking back now, sitting in my living room with Patricia, I could see the signs I'd missed. The way Robert always kept his phone face down on tables. How he'd take certain calls in his study with the door closed, saying it was a difficult client. The weekend trips he'd take alone, claiming he needed time to think through design problems. I'd thought it was endearing, his artistic temperament needing solitude. "Did you ever feel like something was off?" Patricia asked gently. She was sitting in the armchair across from me, still in her work clothes, having rushed over without even stopping at her own house. "No," I said. "That's the worst part. I felt like everything was fine. Better than fine." We just celebrated our 30th anniversary 2 years ago in Greece. It was romantic. We made love under the stars on our hotel balcony. He told me I was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. How do you fake that? Maybe he wasn't faking, Patricia said carefully. Maybe that's the most terrible truth. Maybe he genuinely loved you and genuinely loved her. I stood up and paced to the window overlooking our backyard. Robert had designed the landscaping himself, spent weekends planting trees and laying stone pathways. I'd thought he was relaxing, pursuing his creative passion. Now I wondered if he was thinking about her while he worked. If every tree he planted was guilt, every stone path an apology he'd never voice. She said he told her our marriage was dead, I said, that we were business partners, not spouses. Was she right? Did our marriage die, and I just didn't notice? Patricia came to stand beside me. Your marriage wasn't dead, Vivienne. It had changed, yes. But changing isn't dying. Every long marriage changes. You were still committed to each other. You were still building a life together. But we weren't intimate anymore. Not really. We had sex maybe once a month, if that. We slept in the same bed, but we were like roommates. When was the last time Robert and I had a real conversation about feelings, about dreams? We talked about Marcus's promotion and Lily's business and whether we should refinish the hardwood floors. We talked about everything except us. Did you want more? Patricia asked. I turned to look at her. I don't know. I thought I was content. I thought we both were. We had a good life, Patricia. A really good life. The house, the careers, the kids, financial security. We had everything we'd worked for. Why wasn't that enough for him? I can't answer that. Neither can you, really. Only Robert could, and he's not here anymore. I walked to Robert's study, a room I rarely entered because it was his private space. Patricia followed. The study was exactly as he'd left it Monday morning. Drafting table by the window with sketches of his current project. Bookshelves filled with architecture texts and design magazines. His desk with its sleek modern design, completely organized except for one coffee mug with dried residue at the bottom. I sat in his leather desk chair, the one he'd special ordered from Denmark because he said the ergonomics were perfect. It still smelled like him, his cologne mixed with the scent of paper and ink. What are you looking for? Patricia asked. I don't know. Evidence, proof, something that makes sense of this. I started opening desk drawers systematically. The top drawer held pens, paper clips, a stapler, normal office supplies. The second drawer had files of current projects, neatly labeled and organized. The third drawer was locked. I stared at that locked drawer. In 32 years of marriage, I'd never tried to open it. Robert had said it contained sensitive client information, proprietary designs. I'd respected his privacy, trusted his word completely. Where would he keep the key? Patricia asked. We searched the desk surface, checked the undersides of drawers, looked in the pencil holder. Nothing. Then I remembered the small wooden box on the bookshelf, a gift from a client in Japan. I opened it and found 3 keys on a ring. The second key fit the locked drawer. Inside was a second cell phone, the latest iPhone model, identical to the one Robert carried openly. Beside it was a worn leather journal, and underneath that, a manila envelope bulging with papers. My hands shook as I picked up the phone. It was dead, battery drained. I plugged it into the charger on Robert's desk and waited for it to power on. When it did, the lock screen showed a photo of Robert and Elena on a beach somewhere, both in casual clothes, laughing at something off camera. The date stamp showed it was taken 3 months ago. I didn't know the passcode. Tried his birthday, our anniversary, Marcus's birthday. Nothing worked. After 3 failed attempts, the phone locked me out entirely. Patricia picked up the journal. Should I open this? Yes, I need to know everything. She opened to a random page in the middle and started reading silently. Her expression changed, became pained. Vivian, I don't think... Read it out loud. She hesitated, then began. March 12th, 2021. Elena asked me again today when I'm going to tell Vivian the truth. I promised her this summer, after Marcus's wedding. But that's what I said last year, too. The truth is, I don't know if I can ever tell her. How do you tell someone you've loved for nearly 30 years that you've been lying to her for more than a decade? How do you destroy someone's entire reality? I love Vivian. I love Elena. These aren't contradictory statements, though I know they should be. I'm 2 different men. With Vivian, I'm the successful architect, the stable provider, the father who shows up at school events and family dinners. With Elena, I'm the artist, the dreamer, the man who can be vulnerable and uncertain. I need both of them. I can't choose. I'm a coward, and I know it. Patricia stopped reading. The silence in the study felt suffocating. Keep going, I whispered. She flipped pages, found another entry. June 3rd, 2022. Vivian and I made love last night for the first time in 6 weeks. It was good, comfortable, familiar. She fell asleep in my arms, and I lay there hating myself. Tomorrow I drive to Providence for the weekend. Elena and I are going to that new restaurant she's been wanting to try. I'll make love to her too, and it will be different, but equally real. I'm living 2 complete lives, and both feel authentic. Is that possible? Can a person genuinely inhabit 2 realities? Or am I just so good at lying that I've started believing my own fiction? I stood up and walked out of the study, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water with trembling hands. Patricia followed, carrying the journal. There's more, she said quietly. Years of entries. Vivian, he documented everything. I can't read any more right now. I can't. But even as I said it, I knew I would read every single word eventually. I would know everything. Every lie, every moment of his double life, every time he chose her over me or me over her. I would read it all because not knowing was worse than knowing. Patricia's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. It's my service. I need to take this. It might be about a patient. While she stepped into the hallway to talk, I picked up the manila envelope from Robert's desk. Inside were bank statements for an account I'd never seen before. A small account at a Providence bank, opened 16 years ago. Monthly deposits of $2,000, always on the first of the month. Withdrawals for rent, utilities, groceries, restaurants. He'd been financially supporting 2 households for 16 years. And I'd never noticed because our finances were solid, My income was substantial, and I'd never questioned his traveling expenses or the cash withdrawals he made periodically. At the bottom of the envelope was a document that made my blood freeze. An updated last will and testament, signed and notarized 6 months ago. I'd never seen it. Robert had told me our wills were fine, didn't need updating. In this new will, he'd left Elena Moretti $400,000 outright, plus his half-ownership of an apartment in Providence I didn't know existed. The rest of his estate came to me and the children. But that $400,000 was designated specifically for Elena's future care needs. Future care needs. What did that mean? Patricia came back into the kitchen, her face troubled. I have to go to the hospital, emergency consult. But Vivian, you shouldn't be alone tonight. Call Marcus and Lily, tell them to come home. You need your children. I can't tell them yet. I don't know how. Then call them and just say you need them. They don't need to know everything tonight. After Patricia left, I sat alone in my kitchen as evening darkened into night. I thought about calling my children, but couldn't find the words. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for Elena Moretti, Providence, Rhode Island. I found her easily. A LinkedIn profile showing she'd been a professor of art history at Rhode Island School of Design until retiring 2 years ago. A faculty bio on the RISD website showing her specializations in Renaissance art and Italian culture. A photo of her at a gallery opening, elegant in a navy dress, smiling. She was real. Her life was real. Her love for my husband was real, and so was mine. We'd both loved the same man, built lives around him, believed his promises. The only difference was I'd loved him first, longer, legally. But did that make my pain greater than hers? Or were we both equally destroyed by the same liar? I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs of Robert and Elena, saw his handwriting in that journal, saw that will leaving her $400,000. By 6 in the morning, I gave up trying and went downstairs to make coffee. That's when I decided I needed to see the apartment. The one in Providence that Robert apparently owned, the one where he'd lived his other life. I needed to walk through those rooms, see the bed they'd shared, understand what his world looked like when he wasn't being my husband. I called my office and told them I was taking the rest of the week off. Personal emergency. Then I drove to Providence, which took just under 3 hours in morning traffic. I had the address from the bank statements in that envelope. The apartment was in a restored Victorian building on the east side, walking distance from Brown University. Charming neighborhood with tree-lined streets and cafes, the kind of place Robert would have appreciated aesthetically. I parked across the street and stared up at the third-floor windows. I had no key, no legal right to enter, but I needed to see inside. I called a locksmith and told him I'd locked myself out of my apartment. He met me there within 45 minutes, a young guy who didn't ask questions, just picked the lock professionally and took his $80 cash payment. The moment I stepped inside, I could smell Robert's cologne. After 2 days, it still lingered in the air. The apartment was small, maybe 800 square feet. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, an open kitchen and living area. But it was beautiful. Hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, large windows flooding the space with morning light. The furniture was simple but high quality, a leather sofa in caramel brown, a mid-century modern coffee table, built-in bookshelves filled with art books and architecture texts, and everywhere evidence of their life together. Photos in frames on the bookshelves showing Robert and Elena in dozens of locations over the years. Museums, beaches, restaurants, hiking trails. A throw blanket draped over the sofa in deep blue with what looked like hand-embroidered edges. A coffee maker on the kitchen counter, 2 mugs beside it, one with dried coffee residue at the bottom. I walked to the bedroom. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled like someone had left in a hurry. Of course they were. Robert had collapsed here Monday morning. An ambulance had come. Paramedics had rushed in. Elena had probably been hysterical. I sat on the edge of that bed and ran my hand over the sheets. They were high thread count Egyptian cotton. the same brand we had at home in Greenwich. Robert liked quality linens. I'd thought that was something we shared. Now I realized he'd simply replicated his preferences in both locations. On the nightstand was a book, spine broken from being read multiple times. Italian poetry, the text in Italian with English translations on facing pages. Robert had taken Italian lessons 10 years ago, said it would help with his international clients. I'd thought it was professional development. Now I understood it was so he could read poetry with Elena in her native language. The closet held men's clothes, casual items mostly, jeans and sweaters and button-down shirts. Different from his wardrobe at home, which was more formal, more expensive. These clothes looked comfortable, lived in. A pair of running shoes sat on the closet floor, well worn. I hadn't known Robert ran. In Greenwich, he claimed his knees couldn't handle the impact. I moved to the bathroom. 2 toothbrushes in the holder. Robert's electric razor plugged in by the sink. Men's deodorant, shaving cream, face wash. But also women's items. Moisturizer, makeup remover, a hairdryer. They'd shared this bathroom like any married couple, their routines overlapping, their products side by side. Back in the living room, I examined the bookshelves more carefully. The art books were heavily annotated, notes in the margins in Elena's handwriting. The architecture texts belonged to Robert, his name inscribed inside the covers in his precise script. Their intellectual lives had merged here, just as ours had at home. I found a drawer in the coffee table and opened it. Inside were takeout menus, TV remotes, a few magazines, and underneath, a small velvet box. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a ring, not an engagement ring or wedding band. A simple silver band with an inscription inside. Il mio cuore è tuo, Elena. My heart is yours. Robert had been wearing his wedding ring when he died, the ring I'd placed on his finger 32 years ago. But he'd kept Elena's ring here, in this drawer, this private declaration of love. I pocketed the ring. I don't know why. Maybe as evidence, maybe as punishment for myself, maybe because I needed something tangible from this nightmare. My phone rang, Marcus's name on the screen. Mom, Patricia called me last night. She said something happened at the funeral home and you were upset. What's going on? I looked around the apartment, at this complete life Robert had built apart from us. Marcus, I need you to come home. You and Lily both. I need to tell you something about your father, and I need to tell you in person. You're scaring me. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Can you come today? I'll catch the next train from Boston. I can be there by early afternoon. Thank you. I'm going to call Lily now. Lily was harder. She was in London, 8 hours ahead, probably already at work for the day. When she answered, I could hear office noise in the background. Mom? Is everything all right? It's not like you to call during my workday. Lily, I need you to come home, as soon as you can get a flight. What? Mom, what's wrong? Is it about Dad? Did something happen with the funeral arrangements? Yes, something happened, something I can't explain over the phone. Please, sweetheart. I need you here. Her voice shifted, became worried. Okay, I'll look at flights right now. There's a direct from Heathrow tonight, gets in tomorrow morning. Mom, please tell me what's happening. When you get here. I promise I'll tell you everything when you get here. After we hung up, I sat in Robert's other apartment for another hour, trying to absorb it all. Then I locked the door behind me and drove back to Greenwich. Marcus arrived at 4:30. I heard his car in the driveway and opened the door before he could knock. He looked like his father, same tall frame and dark hair, though Marcus kept his cut shorter and more professional. He worked in corporate law at a prestigious Boston firm, made partner last year at 30. Robert had been so proud. Mom, what's going on? He hugged me, and I held on longer than usual. Come inside. Sit down. This is going to be difficult to hear. We sat in the living room where I'd sat with Patricia the day before. I'd been rehearsing how to say this for hours, but now that Marcus was here, looking at me with Robert's eyes, The words stuck in my throat. "Your father had a second wife," I finally said. "A woman named Elena Moretti. He married her 16 years ago in Italy. He maintained a completely separate life with her in Providence. He died at her apartment, not at a hotel in Boston." Marcus stared at me. His expression went through several changes: confusion, disbelief, then slowly dawning horror. "That's impossible. Dad wouldn't—" "I've seen the proof. Wedding photos, bank statements, an apartment filled with their life together. I've read his journal where he documented everything. It's all true, Marcus." "No." He stood up, paced to the window. "No, there has to be some explanation. Maybe she's lying. Maybe she's a con artist who—" "She's not lying. Your father kept a locked drawer in his study. I found a second phone, the journal, a revised will. He left her $400,000, Marcus, plus an apartment I never knew existed." He turned to face me, and I saw tears in his eyes. Marcus never cried, had prided himself on being stoic since childhood. How could he do this? To you? To us? I don't know. Does Lily know? Not yet. She's flying in tomorrow morning. I wanted to wait until you were both here, so I only have to say this once. Marcus came back to sit beside me. He took my hand, and I realized how rarely we had physical affection anymore. We weren't a demonstrative family. Robert and I had raised our children to be independent, self-sufficient, controlled. Now I wondered if that had been a mistake. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Legally, I mean. This woman can't have any claim to Dad's estate, right?" "I don't know. I need to talk to lawyers. But Marcus, that's not what I'm most concerned about right now. I need to understand how this happened, how he maintained two complete lives for 16 years, how I never suspected anything. You couldn't have known. He was obviously very good at lying. Was he lying, though? That's what I keep asking myself. Elena said he genuinely loved her. His journal said he loved us both. Is it possible to truly love two people at the same time? Marcus's face hardened. No, love doesn't work that way. If he loved you, he wouldn't have betrayed you. What he felt for her wasn't love. It was selfishness. Your father was a lot of things, but he wasn't selfish. Not in the way we normally think of it. He worked hard to provide for us. He never missed your games or Lily's recitals. He was present in our lives, genuinely present, while also being present in another woman's life. Mom, stop defending him. I'm not defending him. I'm trying to understand him. We sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus said quietly, I found something a few years ago. I never told you because I didn't know what it meant. I turned to look at him. What? I was visiting for Christmas 3 years ago. Dad's phone rang while he was in the shower. I glanced at the screen and it said, E. Moretti. He came out and I mentioned someone called and he grabbed the phone really fast, said it was a client, took the call in his study. I thought it was weird how quickly he reacted, but I didn't think anything more of it. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to believe what it might mean. It's easier to ignore suspicions than to confront them. I guess I learned that from you. The accusation in his voice stung, but it was fair. I had ignored signs. The separate phone calls, the weekend trips, the emotional distance that had grown between Robert and me over the years. I'd chosen comfort over truth. I'm sorry, I said. You're right. I should have paid more attention. I'm not trying to blame you, Mom. I'm just angry. At Dad, at this situation, at everything. We ordered Chinese takeout for dinner because neither of us felt like cooking. We ate in relative silence. Then Marcus went to the guest room to make some calls. I heard him talking to his wife Rebecca, explaining the situation. Heard the shock in her voice, even through the closed door. That night, I went back to Robert's study and read more of his journal. Patricia had been right. There were years of entries. I read them chronologically, watching the evolution of his double life. The early entries from 16 years ago were full of guilt and self-recrimination. He called himself terrible things: coward, liar, fraud. He wrote about planning to end things with Elena multiple times, but never following through. He described the night he almost told me the truth, over dinner at our favorite restaurant. But then I'd mentioned Marcus getting into law school, and he couldn't bear to destroy my happiness. The middle years showed him becoming more comfortable with the duality. He stopped calling himself names and started analyzing his situation almost academically. He wrote about reading articles on polyamory, on people who love multiple partners openly. He convinced himself that the only difference between him and them was that he hadn't told us about each other. He called it loving in separate spheres, and justified it by saying both relationships were genuine and fulfilling. The recent entries, from the last year or two, showed growing anxiety. Elena was pushing him to come clean. His health was declining, the aneurysm risk he'd discovered during a routine scan. He knew he was running out of time to make things right, but he still couldn't find the courage. The final entry was dated the Sunday before he died, 3 days ago. It said, "I'm tired of lying, tired of compartmentalizing, tired of being two different men." Elena asked me again this weekend when I'll tell Vivian. I promised her after Lily finishes her design certification in March, but I've been making promises for years and never keeping them. The truth is, I'm a coward, and I'll probably die a coward, and both these women deserve so much better than me. 2 days later, he collapsed in Elena's apartment. It felt like the universe's cruel joke, giving him what he'd predicted. I closed the journal and sat in Robert's chair, looking around his study. How many times had I knocked on that door to tell him dinner was ready? How many times had I brought him coffee while he worked late on a project? I'd respected his space, his privacy, his need for solitude to think. And all that time, he'd been protecting his secrets. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Just boarded. Land at 6 a.m. your time. I'm so worried, Mom. See you soon. Love you." I typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart. Try to rest on the flight." Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to Robert's side of our bed, pulled back the covers, and lay down where he used to sleep. His pillow still smelled like him. I buried my face in it and finally let myself cry properly. Not the controlled tears I'd shed in front of Patricia or Marcus, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had. I cried for the man I'd thought I knew. I cried for Elena, sitting in her apartment in Providence, grieving the same man I was grieving, but without the legal right to do so publicly. I cried for my children, who would have to reconcile the father they'd loved with the man who'd lived a massive lie. I cried for myself, for being so blind, for choosing comfort over curiosity, for building my identity around being the perfect wife of a perfect marriage that had never actually existed. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Marcus knocking on my bedroom door. "Mom?" Lily's plane landed early. She just texted from baggage claim. "Do you want me to pick her up?" I sat up, disoriented. "No, I'll go. Give me 15 minutes. I drove to JFK, still wearing yesterday's clothes, my face puffy from crying. Lily was waiting outside Terminal 1 with her single carry-on bag, looking worried and exhausted. She was 27 but looked younger, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing leggings and an oversized sweatshirt for the long flight. She got in the car and immediately turned to me. "Mom, what's happening? You look terrible." "Thank you for coming home so quickly. I know this disrupted your work." "Forget work. Tell me what's going on." "Not here. When we get home. Marcus is there. I need to tell you both together." The drive back to Greenwich took an hour in morning traffic. Lily kept glancing at me nervously but didn't push. When we walked into the house, Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee. He looked at his sister and something passed between them. That sibling telepathy they'd had since childhood. "Okay, we're both here," Lily said. "Mom, please, what's happened?" We sat in the living room, the same configuration as yesterday with Marcus, but now Lily was here too. I looked at my children, these adults I'd raised, and prepared to shatter their understanding of their father. Your dad had another wife, I said simply. Her name is Elena Moretti. They were together for 16 years. He maintained a complete separate life with her in Providence. Lily's face went white. What? He married her in Italy 16 years ago. He told her he was divorced. He had an apartment in Providence where he lived with her part-time. He died at that apartment, not in Boston. No, Lily whispered. No, that can't be true. Dad wouldn't. I've seen the proof, sweetheart. Photos, documents, bank statements. His journal where he wrote about it for years. It's all real. She started crying immediately, these heartbroken sobs that made my chest ache. Marcus moved to sit beside her, put his arm around her shoulders. He looked at me over her head, his expression hard. How did you find out? Lily asked through tears. The funeral home called. This woman showed up claiming to be his widow. She had wedding photos. She brought documentation. When I went to confront her, I realized she was telling the truth. But Dad loved you, Lily said desperately. He loved us, our family. How could he have another family? He didn't have another family. He had another wife. It was just him and her, no children. Why? Lily demanded. Why would he do this? Was he unhappy with us? I don't know. His journal says he loved us both, that he couldn't choose, that he was two different people and needed both lives. That's insane, Marcus said. That's not how love works. You can't genuinely love two people and lie to both of them for 16 years. Maybe you can, I said quietly. Maybe love is more complicated than we think. Don't, Marcus snapped. Don't try to make sense of this or find some way to justify it. What he did was unforgivable. I agree. I'm not forgiving him. I'm just trying to understand how this happened. Lily wiped her eyes. Have you met her? This Elena woman? Briefly, at the funeral home. And I went to the apartment yesterday. I needed to see where he lived with her. What was it like? Small, beautiful, full of evidence of their life together. Books, photos, personal items. It felt like a real home, not some temporary space. He was invested in that life just as much as he was invested in ours. Lily stood up and walked to the window. I don't know how to process this. Every memory I have of Dad is now contaminated. Every family vacation, every holiday dinner, every time he told me he loved me. Was he thinking about her? Was he comparing us? I don't think so, I said. From reading his journal, it seems like he kept the lives completely separate in his mind. When he was here, he was fully here. When he was there, he was fully there. That's even worse, Lily said. That means he was capable of completely compartmentalizing. What kind of person can do that? Someone who's very good at lying to himself, Marcus said bitterly. We spent the rest of the morning talking in circles, asking questions none of us could answer. Why had Robert done this? When had it started? Had there been signs we'd missed? Could we have stopped it if we'd noticed? At noon, my phone rang. Unknown number again. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Ashford? This is Elena Moretti. I put the phone on speaker so my children could hear. Yes? I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I found something in Robert's things that I think you need to see. Medical records. From 6 months ago. He was diagnosed with an unruptured brain aneurysm. The doctors recommended surgery, but he refused treatment. My blood went cold. What? He knew he could die at any time. He was warned specifically about the risk of sudden rupture. He chose not to have the surgery because he said the recovery time was too long. He couldn't afford to be away from work for weeks. But Mrs. Ashford, I think the real reason was that he couldn't figure out how to explain being unavailable to both of us simultaneously. I looked at my children. Marcus's face was stone. Lily had fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. Why are you telling me this? I asked Elena. Because you deserve to know that his death wasn't just tragic coincidence. He chose this, in a way. He chose the risk of dying over the risk of the truth coming out. And I think you need to know that when you decide how to remember him." She hung up. The three of us sat in silence. Finally, Lily spoke. "He let himself die rather than tell the truth. That's how much of a coward he was." Marcus stood up. "I need to go outside. I can't breathe in here." After he left, Lily came to sit next to me. She took my hand. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you have to deal with this. I'm sorry Dad did this to you." "He did it to all of us," I said. "We all lost him, and we're all discovering we never really knew him at all." 3 days after Lily arrived home, the lawyer called. Not my family attorney, but a specialist in estate law that Marcus had found, someone who handled complicated situations involving contested wills and marital disputes. Her name was Catherine Reeves, and she had a reputation for being ruthlessly efficient. We met at her office in Manhattan, all three of us, me, Marcus, and Lily. Catherine was in her early 50s, gray hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I've reviewed all the documentation you provided," she said, spreading files across her conference table. "The journal entries, the bank statements, the revised will, photos of the Providence apartment. I've also had my investigator look into Elena Moretti's background. Here's what we're dealing with." She pulled out a document. Robert's marriage to Ms. Moretti was performed in Italy under Italian law. He used falsified documents claiming to be divorced. Under U.S. law, this makes the Italian marriage void since his marriage to you, Mrs. Ashford, was never legally dissolved. However, Ms. Moretti can argue common law marriage under Rhode Island statutes if she can prove continuous cohabitation, which the apartment lease and neighbor testimonies would support. "So she has a legal claim?" I asked. "Potentially, but here's where it gets more complicated. Robert updated his will 6 months ago, as you discovered. That will is valid and legally binding. He was of sound mind. The document is properly executed and notarized. He deliberately chose to leave Ms. Moretti $400,000 and 50% ownership of the Providence apartment." Lily made a sound of disgust. "So she gets rewarded for being his mistress?" "In legal terms, she's more than a mistress," Catherine said matter-of-factly. "She may qualify as a domestic partner or common law spouse in Rhode Island, which means she could potentially challenge the will for an even larger share, claiming she's entitled to a spouse's portion under state law." "That's insane," Marcus said. "Mom was his actual legal wife for 32 years. "I agree it's unusual, but the law has to account for many different relationship structures. Ms. Moretti has evidence of a long-term, committed relationship. She has financial records showing Robert supported her, property he purchased for their shared use, documentation of their Italian marriage ceremony performed in good faith. A sympathetic judge might view her as a genuine domestic partner who was also deceived by Robert's lies." I stared at the papers on the table. "What are you recommending?" Catherine leaned back in her chair. "That depends on what outcome you want. Option 1, we contest the will, argue Robert wasn't of sound mind when he updated it, fight every claim Ms. Moretti makes. This will be expensive, lengthy, ugly, and very public. Estate litigation like this tends to attract media attention, especially when it involves bigamy and a successful architect. Your family will be under scrutiny for months, possibly years." "What's option 2?" I asked. "We honor Robert's stated wishes in the will, but negotiate the details. We offer Ms. Moretti the $400,000 he designated for her, plus we buy out her share of the Providence apartment at fair market value. In exchange, she signs a comprehensive release waiving all other claims to Robert's estate, his pension, his Social Security benefits, everything. She gets what Robert wanted her to have, nothing more. She doesn't deserve anything," Marcus said flatly. Catherine looked at him with something like sympathy. "I understand your anger, but consider this. Ms. Moretti was also lied to. She believed Robert was divorced when they married. She gave up 16 years of her life believing she was his legitimate wife. She could have married someone else, had children, built a different life, Instead, she waited for him on weekends and holidays, kept their relationship secret because he asked her to, and now finds out she has no legal recognition as his widow. "That's not our problem," Lily said, but her voice was less certain than Marcus's. "No, it's not," Catherine agreed. "But it might be worth considering whether destroying her financially through litigation serves any purpose beyond revenge. She's 56 years old, retired from teaching with a modest pension. The $400,000 Robert left her would ensure she's financially stable for the rest of her life. Without it, she may genuinely struggle." I thought about the ring I'd found in the apartment drawer. "Il mio cuore è tuo." My heart is yours. I thought about Elena's face at the funeral home, devastated and lost. I thought about the medical information she'd shared, proving Robert had known he was dying and chosen silence over honesty. "There's something else," I said. "Elena told me she has early-stage Alzheimer's disease. That's why Robert's will mentioned future care needs. He knew she'd need money for medical care." Catherine's expression softened. "That changes the ethical landscape considerably. A woman with Alzheimer's fighting a lengthy legal battle would be particularly vulnerable. The stress alone could accelerate her cognitive decline." Marcus stood up and walked to the window overlooking Manhattan. "I can't believe we're actually considering giving her money. Dad's mistress, the woman he betrayed Mom with for 16 years. "She's not just his mistress," I said quietly. "She's another woman he loved and lied to. Another person whose life he destroyed with his choices. Yes, she made the decision to stay with him after learning about me 5 years ago. But Robert made her believe our marriage was essentially over, that he was only staying for appearances and the children's sake." "Was he wrong?" Lily asked suddenly. "About your marriage being dead?" I turned to look at my daughter. "What? I'm not defending Dad. What he did was terrible. But I need to know the truth, Mom. Were you and Dad actually happy? Or had your marriage become what he told Elena it was? A partnership, not a romance?" The question felt like a knife, but Lily deserved honesty. They both did. "We were comfortable," I said carefully. "We'd been together so long that passion had faded into companionship. We rarely had sex anymore, maybe once a month. We slept in the same bed, but lived somewhat separate lives. I thought that was normal for a marriage of our length. I thought we were content." "But were you happy?" Lily pressed. "I thought I was. Now I wonder if I was just comfortable with the status quo. If I'd stopped expecting more because expecting more felt exhausting." Marcus turned from the window. "So Dad's affair was partly your fault? Is that what you're saying?" "No. His choices were his own. But I'm saying our marriage had problems I chose not to examine. I let emotional distance grow between us because it was easier than doing the work to close that distance. Elena offered him something I'd stopped offering: passion, creativity, emotional vulnerability." "Don't justify what he did," Marcus said harshly. "I'm not justifying it. I'm trying to understand it. There's a difference." Catherine cleared her throat. "Mrs. Ashford, I need a decision about how to proceed. Do we contest the will and fight Ms. Moretti, or do we negotiate a settlement?" I looked at my children. Marcus's face was hard, unforgiving. Lily looked torn, conflicted. They were waiting for me to decide, to tell them how we should respond to this betrayal. I thought about the last 16 years of my life. Building my business, raising my children to adulthood, maintaining a home and a marriage I'd believed was solid. I'd worked so hard to create the perfect life, the perfect image. And it had all been built on lies, yes, but also on my willingness not to look too closely at the cracks. Robert had been a coward. He'd chosen deception over difficult conversations. He'd maintained 2 lives rather than making the hard choice to commit fully to one. He'd let himself die rather than face the consequences of his actions. But I didn't have to be a coward. I could choose differently. "We settle," I said. "We give Elena what Robert wanted her to have. Not because she deserves it, and not because I forgive what happened, But because destroying her won't undo the damage Robert did, it won't change the past or heal our pain. It will just create more suffering, and I'm tired of suffering. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Mom, you can't be serious. I am. Catherine, draw up settlement papers, $400,000 plus fair market value for her half of the apartment. In exchange, she releases all claims and agrees to confidentiality about the nature of her relationship with Robert. I don't want this becoming public spectacle. You're letting her win, Marcus said. No, I'm choosing not to fight a battle that has no winner, only different degrees of losing. Catherine nodded. I'll contact Ms. Moretti's attorney and begin negotiations. This is a wise decision, Mrs. Ashford. Not easy, but wise. After the meeting, the three of us stood on the Manhattan sidewalk. It was a clear November afternoon, cold but sunny. People rushed past us, living their normal lives, unaware that our entire world had shattered. I don't understand you, Marcus said to me. How can you be so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm destroyed, but I'm choosing how to respond to that destruction. Robert took enough from me already. I won't let him take my dignity too. Lily hugged me suddenly, fiercely. I love you, Mom. Even when I don't understand your choices, I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Marcus didn't hug me. He got in his car and drove back to Boston without another word. I understood. He needed time to process, to be angry, to grieve the father he'd admired. I couldn't rush that process for him. But standing on that sidewalk with Lily's arms around me, I felt something unexpected, relief. For the first time since the funeral home called, I felt like I'd made a decision that was mine, not dictated by obligation or expectation or image. I'd chosen mercy over vengeance, understanding over rage. It didn't make the pain less, but it made me feel like myself again, like someone who could survive this and come out the other side intact. Catherine's office called 2 weeks later. Elena had agreed to the settlement terms. We would meet at Catherine's office to sign the final papers, and Elena had requested the opportunity to speak with me privately before the signing. Catherine advised against it, said there was no legal requirement for us to meet face-to-face, but something in me wanted to do it. I needed to look Elena Moretti in the eyes one more time. I needed to ask her the questions that had been haunting me since that first day at the funeral home. And maybe, though I barely admitted this to myself, I needed to understand what Robert had seen in her that he hadn't found sufficient in me. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. I drove into Manhattan alone. Marcus had returned to Boston after our lawyer meeting, still angry with me for choosing settlement over litigation. Lily had gone back to London, though she called every few days to check on me. Patricia offered to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. Elena was already in the conference room when I arrived. She stood as I entered, and again I was struck by how similar we looked in structure, despite our differences in coloring and style. She wore a burgundy dress with a gray cardigan, simple pearl earrings. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked tired, older than her 56 years. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said. Her voice was quiet, careful. "Catherine said you had things you wanted to discuss." "I do. But first, I want to say something. I'm sorry. I know those words are inadequate. I know they don't change anything or fix anything, but I need you to hear them. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you and your children." I sat down at the conference table. She remained standing for a moment, then sat across from me. "You didn't cause the pain," I said. "Robert did. You were lied to, just like I was. But I stayed. After I found out about you 5 years ago, I could have left. I should have left. But I loved him, and I believed him when he said his marriage to you was essentially over. I convinced myself I wasn't really hurting anyone because you and Robert were just going through the motions." "Were we?" I asked. I keep asking myself that question. Was Robert right? Had our marriage died years ago and I just didn't notice? Elena looked at me with something like compassion. From what Robert told me, you and he had built a successful partnership. You'd created a comfortable life together. But he said the emotional intimacy had faded, that you'd both become more focused on careers and children than on each other. He said when he tried to have deeper conversations with you, you changed the subject or suggested practical solutions instead of engaging emotionally. The observation stung because it was accurate. I remembered times Robert had tried to talk about feelings, about dreams, about fears, and I'd responded with advice or deflection. I'd been uncomfortable with emotional vulnerability, preferring to keep things pragmatic and controlled. "What was he like with you?" I asked. "Was he different?" She smiled sadly. "Very different. With me, he was more open, more willing to be uncertain or afraid. We spent hours talking about art, philosophy, what gives life meaning. He could be silly with me, playful. We danced in the apartment kitchen at midnight. We read poetry out loud to each other. He cried when we watched sad movies." I tried to imagine Robert crying at a movie. I couldn't. In 32 years of marriage, I'd seen him cry exactly twice, when each of our children was born. He'd always prided himself on being stoic, controlled, the steady provider who didn't burden others with his emotions. "That doesn't sound like the Robert I knew," I admitted. "Because he was a different person with you. He was the successful architect, the responsible father, the stable husband. Those parts of him were real too. But he couldn't be all of himself with you, just like he couldn't be all of himself with me. He split himself in two because he needed both versions to feel complete." That's not an excuse for what he did. No, it's not. It's an explanation, not an excuse. What he did was selfish and cruel. He destroyed both of us by refusing to choose. But I think he genuinely didn't know how to integrate those two parts of himself. He'd built such separate identities that bringing them together felt impossible. I pulled out the silver ring I'd found in the apartment, the one with Elena's inscription. I'd been carrying it in my purse for 2 weeks. "I found this. My heart is yours." She reached for it with trembling hands. "I gave him this on our 10th anniversary, 6 years ago. He wore it sometimes when we were alone in the apartment, but he could never wear it publicly. He was wearing his wedding ring from me when he died." "I know. That's fitting, in a way. He died between our two worlds, in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. Not fully in his life with you, not fully in his life with me. Suspended between the two truths he'd been living." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Elena pulled out a folder from her bag, similar to the one she'd brought to the funeral home. "I brought something I thought you should have. Robert kept a collection of letters he wrote but never sent. Letters to you, explaining everything. I found them in his desk after he died. I think he wrote them as a way of rehearsing what he'd say when he finally told you the truth." She slid the folder across the table. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, all addressed to me, all dated over the past 5 years. My hands shook as I opened the first one. "Dearest Vivian," it began. "I'm writing this letter I'll never send because I'm too much of a coward to say these words to your face. Our marriage isn't what it once was. We both know this, though we never speak of it. We've become roommates who share a last name and a mortgage. We're partners in the business of running a household and raising children, but we're no longer lovers or even really friends." I couldn't read more. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. "He loved you," Elena said quietly. "Please believe that. He loved you differently than he loved me, but it was real. He admired your strength, your intelligence, your independence. He was proud of what you'd built with your business. He just didn't know how to be vulnerable with you anymore." "Did he ever plan to actually tell me?" I asked. "Or was he going to keep writing letters he never sent until one of us died?" "He planned to tell you. He talked about it constantly, especially this last year. He knew the aneurysm could kill him at any time. He wanted to make things right before he died, wanted to give you the choice of whether to stay with him or leave him. But every time he worked up the courage, something would happen. Your son's promotion, your daughter's certification, some family milestone he didn't want to ruin. There was always a reason to wait. Until he ran out of time. Yes. I looked at the stack of letters, all these confessions Robert had written but lacked the courage to deliver. Part of me wanted to read every single one, to understand his thought process, his justifications, his self-recriminations. But another part of me knew that would be torture, picking through the wreckage of his mind, looking for answers that wouldn't actually satisfy. The settlement gives you $400,000, I said, changing the subject. Plus, we're buying out your share of the apartment at fair market value. That's what Robert wanted you to have. It's more than generous, especially considering you have every right to hate me. I don't hate you. I'm trying to, but I can't. You're not the villain in this story. Neither am I. We're both Robert's victims, just in different ways. Elena wiped her eyes. Can I ask you something? When did you stop loving him? In your marriage, when did the love turn into just partnership? The question demanded honesty. I don't know if it was a single moment or a gradual fade. Maybe 10 years ago? We were both working so hard, focused on our careers. The kids were teenagers with their own lives. Robert and I stopped having date nights, stopped prioritizing our relationship. We'd have sex occasionally, but it felt obligatory, something we did because married people are supposed to. We stopped really talking about anything meaningful. And I just accepted it. I thought that's what happens in long marriages. Do you think if you'd fought for the marriage, tried to rekindle things, he wouldn't have needed me? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he would have found someone else anyway because the person he needed to be with you wasn't someone I could have brought out of him. I'm not comfortable with emotional vulnerability. I'm not spontaneous or playful. I'm practical and controlled, and those qualities served me well in business, but maybe not in marriage. You're being very kind to me, Elena said. Kinder than I deserve. I'm being honest. About myself, about our marriage, about what Robert was looking for that he didn't find at home. That doesn't excuse what he did or what you did by staying with him after learning about me. But it explains it. She reached across the table and took my hand. The gesture surprised both of us. Her hand was warm, her grip firm. I need you to know something. When Robert died, the last words he said were your name, not mine. Yours. He looked at me and said, Vivian, and then he collapsed. Even in dying, he was thinking about you. The revelation broke something open in my chest. I started crying, really crying, the way I hadn't let myself cry since that first night. Elena came around the table and put her arms around me, and I let her. This woman who'd shared my husband's bed for 16 years, who'd known versions of him I'd never seen, who'd loved him just as much as I had. We cried together for the man we'd both lost, the man who'd loved us both imperfectly and destroyed us both completely. When we finally pulled apart, Catherine appeared in the doorway, giving us a moment before entering fully. The papers are ready when you are, she said gently. We signed the settlement documents in silence. Elena would receive the money in 30 days, along with the deed to the Providence apartment transferred fully into her name. In exchange, she released all claims to Robert's estate, his pension, his Social Security benefits, his life insurance policies. She agreed to confidentiality about the nature of their relationship, protecting our family's privacy. When it was done, Elena gathered her things to leave. At the door, she turned back to me. Would you like to come to Providence? To see the apartment one more time before I sell it? There are things of Robert's there you might want. Photos, books, personal items. Every instinct told me to say no, to never see that place again, to let Elena handle disposing of everything from that other life. But something deeper made me nod. Yes, I think I would. This Saturday, around noon? I'll be there. After she left, Catherine sat down across from me. That was remarkably civil. I've handled hundreds of estate disputes, and I've never seen two parties in your situation treat each other with such dignity. We're both mourning the same person, I said. Hating each other won't bring him back or undo the damage. It will just make everything worse. Your children might not see it that way. My children are young. They see things in black and white, heroes and villains. Someday they'll understand that most of life happens in the gray areas where people make terrible choices for complicated reasons. I drove home to Greenwich in rush hour traffic, giving me plenty of time to think. I thought about those letters Robert had written, all his unsent confessions. I thought about Elena saying his last word was my name. I thought about 32 years of marriage that had been real and meaningful, but also incomplete. Missing pieces neither of us had been willing to acknowledge. When I got home, I called Marcus and Lily on a three-way call. Told them about the meeting, about signing the settlement papers, about Elena's invitation to visit the apartment. "You're going?" Marcus asked, disbelief clear in his voice. "Yes. I need to see it one more time. I need to collect some of your father's things that should come home." "Mom, why are you doing this?" Lily asked. "Why are you being so understanding of her?" "Because she's not the enemy. Your father's choices are the enemy. His cowardice is the enemy. Elena and I are both casualties of the same war." "I don't know if I can forgive Dad," Lily said quietly. "Every time I think about him now, I just feel angry and betrayed." "You don't have to forgive him. Not now. Maybe not ever. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel betrayed. Those feelings are valid and real, but eventually, I hope you can also remember the good parts. The father who showed up at your school plays, who taught you to ride a bike, who walked you down the aisle. Those moments were real too, even if they coexisted with terrible secrets." "How can you be so rational about this?" Marcus demanded. "Because being irrational won't help. Rage and hatred won't change what happened. They'll just poison whatever life I have left. I'm 57 years old. I could live another 30 years. I refuse to spend them consumed by bitterness over choices Robert made." After we hung up, I went to Robert's study one final time. Looked at his drafting table, his bookshelves, his organized desk. This room had been his sanctuary, the place he retreated to work and think, or so I'd believed. Now I knew it had also been his hiding place, where he kept secrets locked in drawers and lived in fear of discovery. I pulled out his journal and the letters to me and sat down to read them all. It took hours, well past midnight. By the time I finished, I understood Robert better than I had in 32 years of marriage. Understood his fears, his rationalizations, his genuine love for both Elena and me, his paralyzing inability to choose. He'd been weak, but he hadn't been evil, just profoundly, tragically human. The next morning, I woke up feeling something I hadn't felt since the funeral home called clarity. I knew what I needed to do next. I needed to go to Providence, face that apartment one final time, and then close this chapter of my life completely. Not with hatred or vengeance, but with understanding and acceptance. Robert's choices had destroyed the life I thought I had, but they'd also freed me to build something new, something honest, something built on truth instead of comfortable illusions. I just had to figure out what that something was. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. I drove to Providence alone, turning down Patricia's offer to accompany me. This was something I needed to do by myself, one final confrontation with the life Robert had built away from me. Elena was waiting outside the Victorian building when I arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee from a nearby cafe. She handed me one as I got out of the car. "I thought you might need this," she said. "It's a long drive from Greenwich." "Thank you." We went upstairs together. The apartment looked different in daylight, less like a crime scene of betrayal and more like what it actually was, a home where 2 people had loved each other. Elena had cleaned since my last visit, put away personal items, made the space feel less raw. "I've packed up most of Robert's things," she said, gesturing to several boxes stacked near the door. His clothes, books, personal effects. I thought you might want them for Marcus and Lily, things they could keep to remember their father. I opened the first box. Inside were Robert's casual clothes, the jeans and sweaters I'd seen in the closet. Underneath were books on architecture and Italian poetry, margins filled with his handwritten notes, a leather-bound sketchbook full of building designs and random sketches. A watch I'd never seen him wear, simple and elegant. There are photo albums, too, Elena said quietly. Pictures of Robert and me over the years. I wasn't sure if you'd want them, or if they'd just be painful. But I thought maybe someday Marcus and Lily would want to see them, to understand this part of their father's life. I pulled out one of the albums, flipped through pages showing Robert and Elena at museums, restaurants, hiking trails. In every photo, he looked relaxed and happy, younger somehow than in our family photos from the same time periods. There was one picture that stopped me. Robert and Elena on a beach at sunset, his arms around her from behind, both of them laughing at something off-camera. The date stamp showed it was taken the same month as our 30th anniversary trip to Santorini. He'd been with you the weekend before our anniversary trip, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He told me he needed to take you away, to do something special to commemorate 30 years. I understood. I'd always understood that you came first in the official parts of his life. I closed the album. Can I ask you something honestly? Did it hurt? Knowing you'd never have the public acknowledgement, the social recognition, the legitimacy? Every single day, she admitted. I wanted to be able to introduce him as my husband, not my partner. I wanted to attend work events with him, to be acknowledged by his family, to have our relationship be real in the eyes of the world. But I convinced myself that our private reality was enough, that the love we shared in this apartment was worth more than public recognition. Was it? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. Maybe I traded too much for those stolen weekends and secret holidays. Maybe I should have demanded he choose or walked away when he couldn't. But love makes you accept things you never thought you would accept. I walked to the window overlooking the tree-lined street. Down below, people were walking dogs, carrying groceries, living ordinary lives where secrets didn't consume everything. I'm selling my house in Greenwich, I said. The decision had formed sometime during the drive here, crystallizing into certainty. I can't live there anymore. Every room reminds me of the life I thought I had. I need to start over somewhere new. Where will you go? I don't know yet. Maybe back to the city. I loved Manhattan when I was young, before marriage and children and suburbs. Maybe I'll find a place overlooking Central Park, somewhere I can rebuild myself. What about your business? I'm transitioning it to my senior partners. They're capable of running it without me. I've spent the last 17 years building that company. Maybe it's time to figure out who I am beyond CEO, beyond wife, beyond mother. Elena smiled slightly. That sounds terrifying and liberating in equal measure. It is. I turned back to face her. What about you? What will you do now? I'm moving back to Italy, to Tuscany, near where Robert and I married. I have cousins there, childhood friends, and I want to be somewhere beautiful while I still can, while my mind is still mostly intact. The Alzheimer's will progress, but maybe I'll have a few good years first. What about treatment? Medical care? The settlement money will pay for private care when I need it. And being in Italy, surrounded by art and history and beauty, feels like the right place to spend whatever time I have left. Robert would have wanted that for me. We stood in that apartment, two women bound together by one man's deception, and I felt something unexpected. Not quite friendship, but understanding. A recognition that we'd both loved the same flawed human being and been destroyed by his inability to choose. I don't forgive him, I said. I want you to know that. I don't forgive what he did to either of us. Neither do I, Elena agreed, but I understand him, and understanding doesn't require forgiveness. We spent the next hour going through Robert's belongings together. Elena helped me select items she thought Marcus and Lily would want. Their father's watch collection, his architectural awards, personal letters he'd written to his children over the years. She gave me the photo albums too, insisting that someday my children might want to understand all of their father, not just the version they'd known. Before I left, Elena handed me one final item, a sealed envelope with my name written in Robert's handwriting. "I found this in his desk," she said. "It's dated the week before he died. I think it might be the letter he was finally going to give you, the one where he told you everything." I held the envelope but didn't open it. "Did you read it?" "No, it wasn't meant for me." I loaded the boxes into my car with Elena's help. When everything was packed, we stood on the sidewalk facing each other one last time. "Thank you," I said, "for being honest with me, for helping me understand. Thank you for not destroying me. You would have been justified in fighting the settlement, in making this as difficult as possible. You chose mercy instead. We've both suffered enough. Adding more suffering wouldn't honor anyone." Elena pulled me into a hug. It felt natural this time, not awkward or forced. Two survivors of the same disaster acknowledging their shared trauma. "Goodbye, Vivienne." "Goodbye, Elena. I hope Italy brings you peace." I drove back to Greenwich with the boxes of Robert's other life in my trunk and his final letter on the passenger seat. I didn't open the letter until I got home, sitting in my car in the driveway of the house I'd soon be selling. The letter was 5 pages, handwritten in Robert's careful script. It said everything he'd never had the courage to say in person: that he'd loved both of us, that he'd been a coward, that he knew he was destroying lives but couldn't find the strength to stop. He apologized to me, to Elena, to our children. He explained about the aneurysm, about choosing the risk of death over the certainty of exposure. He asked for forgiveness he knew he didn't deserve. The final paragraph said, "Vivienne, you were my first love and in many ways my truest love. What we built together was real and meaningful and important. I failed you not because you weren't enough, but because I wasn't brave enough to be fully myself with you. That's my failure, not yours. Please don't let my cowardice diminish what we had or who you are. You are remarkable, strong, capable of surviving this and building something even better. I only wish I could have been worthy of you." I read that letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it away. Someday, I might share it with Marcus and Lily. Or maybe I'd keep it private. These final words meant only for me. That night, I called a real estate agent about listing the house, called my senior partners about transitioning out of the business, called Marcus and Lily to tell them about my decisions. Marcus was shocked. Lily was supportive. Both promised to help me sort through 3 decades of accumulated possessions before the move. 3 months later, I closed on a 2-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side with views of Central Park. It was smaller than the Greenwich house, but it was mine, untainted by memories of Robert's double life. I furnished it simply, buying new pieces rather than bringing furniture from the old house. This was a fresh start, a new chapter. Patricia helped me move in, along with Lily, who'd flown home from London for the week. Marcus came down from Boston for the day, still somewhat distant, but trying. We ordered pizza and ate sitting on the floor because my new dining table hadn't been delivered yet. "This feels strange," Lily said, looking around the mostly empty apartment, "but also kind of exciting, like you're starting over." I am starting over. At 57, I'm rebuilding my entire life. It's terrifying and exhilarating. "What will you do?" Marcus asked. "Without the business, without the house, what's next?" "I don't know yet. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll take art classes or learn a new language. Maybe I'll write a book about complicated marriages and the lies we tell ourselves. Or maybe I'll just sit in Central Park and figure out who Vivienne Ashford is when she's not defined by her relationship to someone else." 6 months after Robert's death, I scattered half of his ashes in the garden at our old house before the new owners took possession. The other half I gave to Marcus and Lily, letting them decide what to do with their father's remains. I didn't attend whatever private ceremony they held. That was for them, their separate peace to make. I never spoke to Elena again, though I heard through lawyers that she'd moved to Tuscany as planned. I hoped she found peace there, hoped the beauty of Italy brought her comfort in her remaining years. Sometimes I still felt angry about what Robert had done. Sometimes I felt sad about the marriage I'd thought I had. But mostly, I felt free. Free from the burden of maintaining a perfect image. Free from pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Free to be messy and uncertain and human. One evening, sitting on my small balcony, watching the sunset over Central Park, Patricia came by with wine and Chinese takeout. "You seem different," she observed. "Lighter somehow." I am different. Robert's betrayal broke me open, but breaking open let all the things I'd been holding inside finally escape. The need to be perfect, the fear of being vulnerable, the belief that control equals safety. All those illusions shattered, and now I'm rebuilding without them. Do you think you'll ever trust someone again? Fall in love again? Maybe, someday. But first, I need to fall in love with myself, with this life I'm creating from scratch. I need to learn who I am when I'm not performing the role of wife or mother or successful CEO. Just Vivienne, whoever she turns out to be. Patricia raised her wine glass. To Vivienne. May she discover she's even more remarkable than she imagined. I clinked my glass against hers and looked out over the city, at all those lights representing all those lives, each one complicated and messy and beautiful in its own way. Robert had given me an unexpected gift through his betrayal, the gift of truth. Not the truth about him, but the truth about myself. About the ways I'd been complicit in our emotional distance, the ways I'd chosen comfort over connection, the ways I'd hidden from my own feelings behind a facade of perfect control. I was 57 years old, starting over, building a new life from the ruins of the old one. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the life I'd thought I wanted. But it was real, honest, mine. And that was enough.